The first thing I noticed wasn't her voice. It was the sound of the window being cracked open, just a little, like she always did before turning off the light. A habit. Something quiet, almost ritualistic. The air from outside drifted in, cool and sweet with the smell of rain that hadn't started yet. She didn't see him at first. He stood halfway down the hallway, half lit by the lamp spilling from her room. The door was open, barely, enough for him to see her sitting on the edge of the bed, hair still damp from the shower, flipping through a stack of folded clothes. "Could you grab the charger?" she asked, without looking up. Her tone was casual, like she hadn't noticed how late it was, or that her son was asleep just a few doors away. He stepped inside slow. Her bedroom always smelled faintly like lavender and detergent, something comforting, but too intimate for him to name. The charger was tangled near her nightstand. When he bent to pick it up, his shoulder brushed her knee. Not hard, not even enough for an apology, but enough that both froze. Her fingers stilled on the fabric. For a moment, there was only the hum of the ceiling fan and the low beat of a song playing faintly from her phone. He handed her the charger, careful not to meet her eyes, but she didn't take it right away. "Thanks," she said finally, her voice lower now. He nodded, still standing there like he'd forgotten how to move. She looked tired, not the kind of tired sleep fixes, but the kind that sits behind the eyes. Her robe slipped a little off one shoulder, and she adjusted it without thinking, but the motion made him look away too late. He tried to say something, anything, but his throat felt tight. Instead, he looked toward the open window. The curtain lifted slightly in the breeze, brushing against the back of his hand where it rested on the dresser. "You're quiet tonight," she said. He shrugged. Didn't want to wake anyone. She smiled faintly, but didn't answer. Her gaze lingered on him a second too long, not searching, just seeing, like she was trying to read something in his face that he didn't want her to find. He reached for the doorknob, finally remembering he should leave. "Good night," he managed. "Wait," she said, too soft, too quick. He turned. She hesitated, eyes flicking to the charger still in her lap. "You forgot your hoodie," she murmured, holding it out. He hadn't even realized it was there, draped over her chair from earlier that evening when he'd helped move some boxes. He stepped closer again, close enough to smell her shampoo, to hear her shallow exhale when his fingers brushed hers as he took it. Something passed between them, small, invisible, dangerous. The kind of thing that doesn't have a name because saying it out loud would make it real. He folded the hoodie slowly, trying to delay the moment he'd have to walk out. "You can keep it if you want," he said, the words slipping out before he could think. Her lips parted, surprised, not at what he said, but that he said anything at all. Outside, thunder rolled far away, barely a whisper. She looked down, thumb tracing the seam of the hoodie like she was deciding whether to say something back. When she finally looked up, her voice was steady, but her eyes weren't. "Go on," she said quietly. "Before the rain starts." He did. But even after the door closed, he could still feel the warmth of that brief touch, the one that didn't mean anything. At least, not yet. The rain arrived before morning did. Not a storm, just a steady, gray drizzle that blurred the windows and made the whole house sound quieter than usual. He was sitting at the kitchen counter, scrolling through nothing, trying to look like he wasn't waiting to hear her footsteps upstairs. She came down around 8. Hair tied up this time, sleeves pushed to her elbows. She wore one of those soft sweaters that looked borrowed from someone who didn't need it back. She smiled when she saw him, just a faint curve of her lips. "You're up early." "Couldn't sleep," he said. "Too much coffee again." He nodded, but they both knew it wasn't that. She poured herself some tea, the kind that smelled faintly of citrus and honey. The kettle hissed, and she hummed under her breath, a habit he'd noticed the first week he started helping around the house. She did that when she didn't want silence to mean too much. "How's your project going?" she asked. He blinked. "What project?" Her eyes flicked up. "The one you said you were writing. Or was that just an excuse to use the printer?" He laughed softly, relieved. "No, I'm still working on it." There was a pause. She stirred her tea even after the sugar had dissolved, and he wondered if she knew he'd spent half the night replaying the sound of her voice telling him to go before the rain started. She finally sat across from him. "You look tired." "Didn't you just say that about yourself last night?" he said, before realizing how easily that came out. Her gaze lifted, slow, searching. "You remember that?" He wanted to shrug it off, but couldn't. "Yeah." Her mouth opened, then closed again. A quiet exhale. You shouldn't. Something about the way she said it, like it was both a warning and an apology, made his chest feel heavier. He wanted to ask what she meant, but before he could, the front door creaked open. Her son's voice called from the hall, followed by the thud of shoes against the floor. She stood immediately, like she'd been caught doing something she wasn't supposed to. You can leave that mug, she said, too quickly. I'll get it. He nodded, but his hand stayed on the counter. The moment, whatever fragile thing it was, broke. When her son walked in, she smiled easily, slipping back into something practiced and effortless. The kind of calm you only learn after years of pretending everything's fine. He muttered a goodbye and left, hoodie still damp from the night before. That evening, he told himself not to go back. And yet, around dusk, he found himself walking past her window again. The curtains were half drawn, light spilling through like a secret trying not to be kept. She was there, sitting on the floor, sorting through old photos spread across the rug. He knocked lightly. She startled, then smiled when she saw him. Hey, she said, voice low. Come in before you melt. He stepped inside, shoes wet from the rain. The photos were mostly of her son, birthdays, graduations, all those moments people smile for the camera and forget later. You kept all these? He asked. Most of them, she said. I was trying to clean up, but, she trailed off, holding one photo a little longer than the rest. He sat beside her, careful not to get too close. The air smelled like rain and old paper. You miss him? He's right upstairs, she said, smiling faintly. That's the funny part. He didn't answer. She turned the photo over, then looked at him, not quite meeting his eyes. You remind me of how he used to be, before he stopped telling me things. He swallowed hard, pulse in his throat. Guess that makes this weird, huh? Her laugh was small, sad. A little. Their hands brushed when she reached for another photo. Neither pulled away. It lasted just long enough to make breathing difficult. Long enough for her to realize it was a mistake, and for him to wish she hadn't noticed. She did. She always did. Don't, she whispered, voice trembling just enough to betray her. He didn't know if she meant his hand or his thoughts. Either way, it was already too late. The next time he saw her, it wasn't planned. It was one of those dull afternoons when the air felt heavy with the threat of rain again, and he'd gone out just to be somewhere else. The cafe on Main was nearly empty, soft jazz in the background, the hum of the espresso machine, the faint clatter of cups. He spotted her before she saw him, standing at the counter, her coat still damp, hair tucked behind one ear as she waited for her. Drink. She looked different outside the house. Lighter somehow, or maybe just less guarded. He hesitated at first, then pretended to notice her by chance. Didn't think you came here, he said, walking up beside her. She turned, smiling in that restrained way she always did. Didn't think you'd be awake before noon. He grinned. Caught me on a good day. It was small talk, meaningless on the surface, but every word felt like a tightrope. One wrong step, and something real might slip out. They found a corner table, the kind half hidden behind a column. Her tea steamed between them, and his untouched coffee grew colder by the minute. So, she said, stirring her drink absently, have you told him you're writing again? He shook his head. No, he'd just make fun of it. She smiled faintly. He used to make fun of everything, even me. He laughed, but it came out softer than he intended. You kind of let him. Her eyebrow lifted. Let him. He shrugged. You never push back? You just smile through it. Her expression shifted, not angry, just surprised he'd noticed. And what would you know about that? He wanted to say everything. That he'd noticed how she looked away when her son ignored her. How her hands would fidget with her necklace whenever she was trying not to say something that mattered. But he only said, enough. A silence followed, not uncomfortable, but charged. She leaned back, arms crossed, studying him in a way that made him want to look anywhere but her eyes. You're getting too good at seeing through people, she said quietly. Only one person, he replied before thinking. Her lips parted, a breath catching between them. The barista's voice cut through the moment. Her name, called out sharply from the counter. She blinked, breaking the gaze. That's me. He nodded, exhaling the breath he hadn't realized he was holding. She stood, smoothing her coat, her fingers brushing the edge of the table, just close enough that his hand almost moved to meet hers. Almost. When she came back, she didn't sit immediately. She looked down at him, hesitant. You shouldn't look at me like that. He froze. Like what? Like you're waiting for me to say something I shouldn't, she said. Her voice wasn't stern. It trembled a little, like she'd already said too much. He opened his mouth, but the words tangled in his throat. I wasn't. Don't, she interrupted softly. It's fine. But it wasn't. When she finally sat down again, the air between them felt heavier. Her phone buzzed on the table, a message flashing her son's name. She silenced it without opening it, her fingers lingering a beat too long on the screen. He noticed. She looked up again, trying to smile, but it didn't reach her eyes this time. You should go? Before people start wondering. He wanted to ask who. Her son, her friends, or maybe just herself. But he didn't. He just nodded, stood, and left. Outside, the drizzle had turned to rain. He waited across the street under the awning, watching her through the glass as she sat alone, one hand pressed to her forehead, like she was trying to hold something in. When she finally looked up, her gaze found him through the reflection. Neither moved. Then the light above flickered once, and she turned away. He stood there long after, unsure if he was waiting for the rain to stop or for her to look back. He found her again, not by accident this time. It had been 2 days since the cafe, and he'd told himself he'd stop showing up where she might be. But by evening, there he was, standing in her kitchen again, pretending to help fix the dripping tap that had been leaking for weeks. She didn't mention the cafe. Neither did he. The rain had stopped, but the air inside was heavy, still carrying that faint metallic smell of water and dust. She leaned against the counter, arms folded, watching him twist the wrench like she didn't quite believe he knew what he was doing. Careful, she said. Last time you tried fixing something, I had to call a plumber. He smiled without looking up. I'm getting better. She tilted her head, the corner of her mouth twitching. At plumbing or pretending you know what you're doing? Both. That earned him a small laugh, soft, breathy, the kind that only came when she forgot to hold herself back. He glanced up, caught it, and for a moment neither of them looked away. It shouldn't have felt like anything, but it did. He straightened, wiping his hands on a towel. You could have called someone to fix it, he said, trying to sound casual. I could have, she said, but I didn't. The silence stretched thin between them, humming with everything unsaid. Her hand brushed the edge of the counter, fingers tapping lightly, a nervous rhythm. You shouldn't keep coming by so much, she said finally. He swallowed. You want me to stop? I didn't say that. Her eyes flicked to his, steady now. I just think people notice things. He tried to laugh it off. People like who? She didn't answer, just looked at him, and that was enough. He set the wrench down, leaning closer than he meant to. You really think anyone would care? She exhaled, barely shaking her head. That's not the point. Then what is? Her lips parted, but no sound came out. She looked away, brushing her hand against her neck, fingers trembling slightly. You don't understand what you're doing. He took a step closer. Then explain it to me. I can't, she said quickly, too quickly, like the words were sharp. He could feel the heat between them, the way her pulse jumped just under her collarbone. His voice dropped. You keep saying that, but you never tell me why. Because I don't trust myself when you ask, she whispered. He froze. It wasn't a confession, not really, just close enough to sound like one. The clock ticked somewhere behind them. The kitchen light buzzed faintly. Her breathing was uneven, and his hands had started to tremble without him realizing. She turned away, reaching for her mug. On the counter, but her fingers brushed his wrist instead, brief, accidental, and somehow the only thing that felt real in the whole room. He didn't pull back. Neither did she. Then the sound of footsteps upstairs broke the moment, the muffled creak of her son moving across the hall. She stepped back instantly, setting the mug down too hard. Tea sloshed over the rim. You should go, she said, voice low, trembling. He nodded, but didn't move. Her hand hovered in the air like she might reach for him again, or push him away. Please, she added, quieter now. He finally turned toward the door. Just before he stepped out, she said his name. He looked back, and her eyes held his like a question she couldn't bring herself to ask. Neither spoke. Then she blinked, and whatever she might have said disappeared between them, like steam fading from her untouched tea. The next day started out ordinary, or at least, it tried to be. He told himself he wouldn't go back. He meant it this time. But late afternoon found him pacing outside her house again, replaying the sound of her voice, that trembling, I don't trust myself when you ask. Before he could talk himself out of it, the door opened. She wasn't alone. A man stood beside her, older, dressed in the kind of quiet confidence that made the air shift when he entered a room. His hand rested lightly at her back, too familiar, too practiced. She saw the younger man first. The flicker in her eyes was almost invisible, but he caught it, the slight stiffening of her shoulders, the quick inhale before she spoke. "Hey," she said, her voice careful, almost formal. "Didn't expect you today." He swallowed hard. "Didn't plan on it." The man turned, offering a polite smile. "You must be the one helping with the repairs. Heard a lot about you." He forced a nod, the kind that meant nothing. "Just fixing a few things." Her hands twisted in front of her, fingers fidgeting with the edge of her sleeve. She looked uncomfortable. Guilty, may be, or afraid he'd say something he shouldn't. The man, her ex-husband maybe, stepped forward. "I was just dropping off some things I still had from the house." "Right," she said quickly. "Thanks for bringing them." He could have left. Should have. But his feet stayed planted, caught in the quiet storm building beneath her calm. When the man finally left, she closed the door slowly, keeping her back to him. For a long moment, she said nothing. "Who was that?" he asked. His voice sounded too sharp, too demanding. She turned, eyes tired. "My ex." "Oh." He tried to sound neutral. Failed. "Didn't know he still came around." "He doesn't," she said. "He just needed to drop something off." The silence that followed was heavy, thick with everything unsaid. "You didn't have to look at me like that," she said finally. "Like what?" "Like you think you have a right to feel anything about him." He flinched, looking away. "You're right. I don't." But he did. That was the problem. She stepped closer, her voice quieter now. "You shouldn't have been here." "Maybe not," he said. "But you didn't want me to stop, either." That broke something in the air between them. Not anger, exactly, but truth leaking out too fast to hide. Her eyes glistened, not from tears but restraint. "You don't understand how easy it is to ruin things. How fast people start talking." "I don't care about them," he said. "You should," she whispered. He exhaled, jaw tight. "Then tell me to stop." Her breath hitched. She opened her mouth, but no words came. Her hand lifted halfway, fingers trembling, then fell uselessly to her side. "Tell me," he said again, softer this time. She stepped closer instead, close enough that he could feel the warmth radiating from her skin, the faint scent of her perfume, the one he noticed the first night he saw her through the cracked door. "You shouldn't make me choose," she said finally. "I'm not," he lied. Her eyes searched his, as if trying to find the version of him she could still walk away from. Whatever she saw there, it wasn't enough to make her move. Outside, a car engine started, her ex driving off. The sound faded slowly, leaving only the two of them and the echo of everything that had just been revealed. He could have stepped back. She could have walked away. Neither did. Instead, she whispered, "If you stay right now, it'll mean something." He didn't answer. He just stood there, between the door and her, realizing that meaning was exactly what he'd been chasing all along. He didn't sleep that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her, standing in the doorway, whispering, "If you stay right now, it'll mean something." The words looped in his head until morning blurred into gray light and coffee gone cold. He walked for hours, not sure where he was going, only that every turn led him back to her street. By the time he reached her house, the sky had that strange stillness before rain, quiet, heavy, waiting. Her car was still in the driveway, curtains half drawn, the same window cracked open, just like always. He hesitated at the door, knocked once, then again. When it opened, she looked different, tired. Her hair was pulled back messily, and there was no careful smile waiting for him this time. "You shouldn't be here," she said softly. "I know," he replied. "Then why are you?" He tried to answer, but the words tangled like they always did when she looked at him that way, half-guarded, half hoping he'd say the one thing she didn't want to hear. "I need to understand what last night was," he said finally. "What we're doing." She exhaled, stepping back just enough for him to enter. The house smelled like coffee and rain, familiar, but sharper now, edged with something unspoken. She leaned against the counter, fingers tracing the rim of a mug. "There isn't a we," she said. "There can't be." He nodded, but didn't move. That's not what it felt like. Her eyes flicked to his, and for a heartbeat, she didn't blink. "Don't do tea." "That." "Do what?" "Say things like that. You're too young to mean them, and I'm too old to believe them." He shook his head. "That's not fair." "No." she said quietly. It's not. But it's true. The silence stretched, pulling at both of them. He stepped closer, his voice low. You can lie to me if you want. Just don't pretend last night didn't matter. Her hand tightened around the mug. You think this is easy? You think I haven't replayed it all morning, wondering what line we crossed that can't be undone? Then tell me, he said. Tell me it didn't mean anything, and I'll walk out right now. Her mouth opened, but the words never came. Her breath shook instead. He took another step, close enough now to see the faint tremor in her hands, the tiny scar near her wrist, the one he'd noticed once but never asked about. I can't tell you that, she said finally. He reached for her hand, hesitated. Then I took it anyway. Her fingers didn't pull away. They trembled once, then steadied in his grasp. I don't know what will happen next, he admitted. But I don't want to keep pretending. She laughed softly, not out of joy, but disbelief. You think this is pretending? I think it's both of us pretending not to care, he said. And I'm done doing that. She looked at him then, really looked, the way she used to before stopping herself. Her eyes softened, and something fragile cracked between them. You'll regret this, she whispered. Probably, he said. But not tonight. Her hand squeezed his once, quick, desperate, final, before she pulled away. He waited for her to say something else, but she didn't. She just turned toward the window, blinking back something she didn't want him to see. When he finally walked out, rain had started to fall, light, patient, endless. He didn't look back, but he could still feel the warmth of her hand lingering against his skin, proof that for one impossible moment, neither of them had run. And maybe that was enough. The rain didn't stop for 3 days. It came in quiet waves, tapping against windows, soaking streets, washing everything into softer shades of gray. He didn't go back during that time, not because he didn't want to, but because he finally understood what she meant when she said, if you stay, it'll mean something. It already did. He spent those days drifting, cafe to cafe, notebook half full of words that weren't quite about her, but never fully about anything else. He'd pick up his phone sometimes, thumb hovering over her name, but never press send. There was nothing left to say that wouldn't open everything again. On the 4th morning, sunlight returned, pale and tentative. He walked past her street out of habit, but the curtains were drawn, the window closed. For the first time, that small crack of air wasn't there. Something in him shifted. Not broken, just rearranged. Later that week, he ran into her son downtown. He was laughing with friends, carefree in a way that made something in the younger man's chest tighten. The boy waved when he saw him. Hey, Mom said you fixed the sink. Thanks, man. He smiled back, forcing his voice to stay even. Yeah, no problem. That was all. Just a few words exchanged on a busy street, then gone again. But it was enough to remind him that what they'd shared wasn't meant to fit anywhere. Not in stories, not in definitions, not even in memory without ache. It was one of those things that existed quietly between two people who'd both been seen a little too clearly. Weeks passed. He stopped waiting for her messages. I started sleeping again. But sometimes, when it rained, he'd still catch himself glancing toward her house, expecting that familiar flicker of light through the window. She never appeared. And somehow, that was the right kind of ending. Because love, real love, the kind that leaves you a little undone, doesn't always demand to be kept. Sometimes it's just meant to pass through, to show you something about yourself you wouldn't have found otherwise. He learned that silence can say more than words. That restraint, as painful as it feels, can be its own kind of care. And that not every connection needs to be claimed to be real. One evening, months later, he sat at the same cafe where they'd once talked over cold coffee and half-truths. The seat across from him was empty, but her presence lingered, in the soft hum of conversation, the way the lights spilled over the table, the faint echo of that laugh he hadn't heard in too long. He smiled, just once, then opened his notebook. The page was blank, waiting. He didn't write about her directly, but every line carried something of that night. The scent of rain, the brush of a hand, the memory of someone who looked at him like she wished she hadn't. And maybe that was enough, too, to turn what never could be into something that would always remain. When he finally closed the book, the cafe had gone quiet. Outside, the streetlights flickered against the wet pavement, and for a fleeting second, he thought he saw her reflection in the glass, soft, distant, smiling. But it was just the rain again, falling like it always did. Did this story stay with you? If it did, tell me. Would you have wanted him to turn back that night, or let her go the way he did? And what kind of quiet, real love stories do you want to hear next? The ones that end in peace, or the ones that leave a mark?